Hi everybody, I'm Trish Christ. In this episode of Our Nashville, NECAT and our super crew of teenagers spend some time with WXNA. Co-founder Randy Fox and the WXNA team are going to show and tell us all the cool things they do in our community. Are you ready, Randy?
Yes.
Are you ready, super crew?
Yes.
Let's make a show.
It's our Nashville. It's our Nashville.
It's our Nashville.
It's our Nashville.
We all know how to talk about our organization during meetings, but what about the chance encounter of a lifetime? You never know who may share your next elevator, notice your logo on a notebook or a tote bag, and ask what you do. What's the clearest, most persuasive thing you can say in a short elevator ride?
We're a free-form format, which means that every DJ is passionate about what they play. They have full freedom to pick what they want to play, and we can go from punk rock to jazz to country to industrial music to whatever. And as we like to say, we don't change the channel. You don't have to change the station. We change it for you every 2 hours. We kind of grew out of the ashes of Nashville's former college radio station, WRVU, which was Vanderbilt's station. WRVU for years followed a free-form format, and they had very loose application procedures, mainly because there was never enough students to take up all the spots that they had on the dial. So they would have what they called community volunteers, people who weren't affiliated with the university in any way, could apply and get a show, and if you did a good show, usually you could hang around for a few years. Well, I started doing a show at RVU in 1997. And I remember at the time thinking, wow, this is really cool. And if Vanderbilt ever wakes up and realizes what's going on here, they're probably going to shut it down. So at that point, they'd been getting away with it for several years, and they got away with it for several years more. But what really eventually happened was that Vanderbilt, like a lot of college stations now, started realizing that they had a valuable asset in a broadcast license, and they could sell that asset, and there were people out there who wanted to buy that license. And that's what happened here, was that Vanderbilt eventually put that license up for sale, and WRVU still exists as an online station for students only, but for years it had been that kind of oddball community station. It was a hybrid station. It was part a student-run radio, and it was also partly a community station too. Now, around the same time that I got onto WRVU, I found out about this station in Jersey City, New Jersey, which broadcasts in New York City, called WFMU. And they were a completely independent freeform station. They basically were kind of like a college radio station, but not affiliated with the university. And when I first found out about their programming and how weird and eclectic it was and how open they were to having people come in and do shows, I thought, wow, that's what we need here in Nashville, because that way you don't have to worry about the university ever shutting it down. But of course, as long as there was a university station here that was focused on the community, that wasn't going to happen. There was no need for that to happen. So while everyone was disappointed that when RVU went away, it was also me and other people saw that as an opportunity, like we can rebuild this and make it where nobody can take it away, because it's going to be an asset for the community rather than affiliated with the university. And basically that's what happened here. Was a group of us got together. Heather Lose, who's a DJ at the station and a former board member, she started the ball rolling, and the rest of us jumped on.
There's a saying that I love, and I keep intending to paint it and put it in the studio here at NECAT. The Titanic was built by professionals, but Noah was just some guy who had an idea and went out and built an ark. And that is so true of so many nonprofits. I know so many animal lovers who end up, starting a humane type association, or actors who end up running the theater company. We don't start this knowing how to build the ship that we're supposed to build. We just want to be on the ship, is usually the case. Right. Did you guys come in with experts and program, did you know what you were doing?
it almost became a running joke, especially the first year or so we were on the air, of like, whose idea was it to start a radio station? Who thought this was a good idea? There were 7 of us that founded. We basically filled out the paperwork, we got the license, and then it was like,
Now what do we
now what do we do? Of the 7 original board members, there was one of us that had worked in radio before. And that was Heather Lose. She'd worked some in commercial radio, and she worked at a non-commercial station when she was in school. And but even there, I mean, she only knew about certain small areas.
Her role.
Yeah, her role in those places. The rest of us, we knew how to go on and turn on the microphones and operate the turntable and the CD player and talk a lot on the air. But that was the extent of our knowledge at all. We didn't have any idea of the technical details. We didn't have any idea of the laws involved and the regulations involved with the FCC. So it was just totally a learning process for really all of us. And I think it's a great example of how I'm an old punk rock guy. And so I love the idea. To me, the core of punk rock is DIY, do it yourself. Yeah. And we just took that attitude and said, we don't have a clue how to do this, but we're going to figure it out. Mm-hmm. We're going to learn 3 chords on the guitar and bash out a song and print our own fanzine and put out our own records, or in this case, build our own radio station. And, if we can do it, anybody can.
My name is Ashley Crownover, and I'm the station manager here at WXNA, which just means I'm a DJ wrangler and or a den mother, and I'm one of the 7 people who started the station. When we first moved in here, we had around 100 DJs, between 90 and 100 DJs, and we were so excited. It was so exciting to have our own space and to feel like a real radio station. And the moment when we went on the air, it was June 4th, 2016. And we all cried. We really did, out of just sheer joy. It was so joyful and exciting. And so this place has all that in its walls.
This is WXNA's main studio, and that's where we broadcast from. This is the mixing board. We have different channels coming for record players, for CD players, for microphones, and they all come into the board, and it's how you mix the sound, determine which channels are going out and how high the levels are. And of course you have to watch your levels, because if you go things too high or too hot, you can distort your signal.
We've got the really cool make you feel real indicator here that tells you how loud your song is. Sometimes we rock out a little bit too much, but we try to keep it out of the red, just like you want to do in all aspects of your life.
If you have 80 to 90 DJs at any given time, the range of styles of music must be almost immeasurable.
Well, we have country shows and jazz shows. We have psychedelic. We have hip hop. We have soul. Older traditional soul. We have neo soul shows. We've had shows that focus specifically on musicians and interviewing musicians, which of course are part music and part interview. We have a visual arts program, which is
it's interesting for
visual
radio.
arts on the radio, but artists come on and they talk about their work and what inspired them and what drives their creativity.
Fantastic.
So.
What is the process for someone who's interested in having a show on WXNA?
Well, what we do is we do roughly 6-month programming periods, and at the end of every 6 months, we kind of have all of our current DJs reapply. And if somebody's done a good show and been a part of the station and been a part of our community, mm-hmm. because that's the important thing. Being a community radio station, we're all volunteer. And that volunteerism doesn't just extend to the show that they do, it also extends to the work that we do with the station, managing the station, mm-hmm. running events, and so forth and so on. So if someone's a DJ in good standing, most of the time they're going to be renewed. But at the same time, sometimes people may be doing a show for a while and they get tired, or they've got something going on in their life and they need to step away for a while. And since we from the very beginning, I said I wanted to encourage the idea that people could step away from doing a show and then 6 months or a year or 2 years later come back and get back on the air again, because I really believed in the idea that the reason we're doing this is because we love what we're doing.
It's fun.
And I wouldn't want someone to just stick with their show because it's like, well, I'm really tired of it and I want to take a break, but if I give up my show, I may not get it back. So I'm going to stick with it. And it's like, no, that's not a recipe for good radio. If you're not, especially when you're not getting paid, if you're not passionate and enjoying what you're doing, it's going to come through on the air. So anyway, as a result of that, every 6 months, we'll usually have some open spots. So what we'll do is, after we kind of set the new schedule, we'll throw out a call to people, and we just have people send in applications. Now, what we found is that most of the time we only have about room for around 10 to 15 open new slots. We bring people, they train for 6 months. After they go through our training program, they can become substitute DJs, where if someone has to miss their show, they can sign up to fill in for someone else. And then at the end of that 6 month period, when the next programming schedule begins, then they can apply to get a new show. So basically, they're kind of with the station for 6 months. That sometimes give people a chance to, everybody, being the DJ sounds fun, but it can be a lot of work, and it is a commitment.
There's
and
preparation.
sometimes people will sign up, they'll go through the training program, and then they'll kind of drop out because they realize, they don't want to. It was more work than they realized.
I appreciate the amount of work it is and the length of time that your training period is, because it's not just getting accustomed to speaking to a microphone and not to a face of a friend. But it's also, you got to push the right buttons, and you got to give your station ID when you're supposed to. There's some rules that you have to follow. It's not just, hey, I like this song.
Well, yeah, and actually that's a good point there too, because when we do look at new applicants, one of the main things that we look at is, are they passionate about the programming they want to bring, and are they knowledgeable about it? And there's been several times that we've chosen someone who had absolutely zero radio experience over someone who perhaps had worked in radio for many, many years, because their proposal was just like, it sounds like something that you'd hear on commercial radio, or it sounds like they're not really as passionate about it, whereas this person is bringing something. And especially if they're applying for a specialty show, we look for genres of music that we don't already have on the air. Like we have a great heavy metal show, and I mean hardcore heavy metal.
I've heard that one.
And the guy who did that, he had never been on the radio before in his life, but boy, did he know, he knew his metal, so he got the show.
Have I heard something in French from time to time?
Yes, right now we just added, we have a girl who is actually, her mother's from Tennessee and her father's French. So she grew up partially in France and partially in Tennessee. And she's doing a show of all French pop music right now, which is fantastic. Yeah.
Je m'appelle Natacha Nancel et je suis un DJ à WXNA. J'ai une émission qui s'appelle The French Connection. This show has given me the opportunity to share the music that I love, that I grew up with, that has stuck with me throughout my whole life, even after moving to Nashville, and share that with Nashville, the community in Nashville, and also the world, because we can stream our station online on our website. And so I've gotten some responses from people in France, people in England who have listened to my show. So it's amazing. It's really a French connection. I actually heard about WXNA when the station started. Two of my good friends were involved at the start when WXNA first came about. I did a little bit of radio at UTC, went to UT Chattanooga. And when I moved back to Nashville after that, I was like, it's my time to get back involved in radio. And WXNA was the first station that I thought of. So when I saw that they were looking for more DJs, I applied, and it seemed like they liked what I could bring to their community. And here I am now.
My name is Erin Mock, and I host a show called Wishful Thinking here for WXNA. So every week we fill in the prompt, songs that make me wish, and it's different each week. So I've done songs that make me wish I wrote them, songs that make me wish I were in a band, songs that make me wish I were back in high school. My husband was one of the first DJs for the station, And I come from a music background. I went to Belmont for music business. I worked in music publishing, and then I decided to stay home when we had our first child, which I've loved doing, but I really wanted a creative outlet. When I turned 30, I just felt brave enough to be like, I'm gonna try for a radio show. Like I used to perform, I miss the music and the performance aspect of my life. Let's go for it. So I applied, and I was lucky enough to get a show, and I've loved it ever since. It's a highlight of my week. I feel like a lot of women deal, I know like when I was I went to a music school, and I always felt like, oh God, do people around here know more than me? Like it's that imposter syndrome that I think a lot of people suffer from, but I think women really have that feeling, unfortunately. And I did, and that carried that with me through my college experience, and then my work experience, and then coming here, it was like creating your own hour of music that you're sending out there. You're working all of these boards, and when you have another DJ who you respect or whose music knowledge, you're just like, they're a music encyclopedia, and they go, hey, I really liked your show this week. You did a great job. And it's just very freeing and very healing in that way.
My name is Anna Lundy, and I'm a DJ at WXNA. I host Untune the Sky. I also help a little with the social media for the station. Untune the Sky is kind of a goofy show. There's a lot of different pop music represented there. Kind of wanted to set some boundaries, so I said pop music, and that can be a lot of things. And in the case of my show, it's a lot of 60s pop, girl groups, the Zombies, the Kinks, and then also some kind of lo-fi pop music on independent labels coming out in the 80s and 90s. I do play music from today. I've bought, there will be new releases, and sometimes those brand new records and those brand new bands will make it into my show. But a lot of time there's a bit of backward looking at the past and music of the 90s and before that. But I try to make sure that I represent women well on my show, and I find that there have been weeks I actually pick only female artists just accidentally. It just happens. But sometimes my show might be a little lady heavy, but I feel like that's me making up for the lack of women on radio, on all formats of music. Personally, as a music listener, I do like all kinds of music, so I love the freedom and the funky things that turn up on freeform radio. It's such a blessing to have WXNA in Nashville and provide that here, because before the station was on the air, especially after there was not a college radio option to listen to in Nashville, I found myself streaming freeform radio stations from other parts of the country. I feel like a freeform station really lets music lovers have what they want, and that's all the music, all the good music anyways.
My name is Paul Birch, and I have a show on WXNA called the Works Progress Radio Hour. The Works Progress idea is a literal terms like of inviting artists who are at a good stage of their maybe album making or songwriting, where they're ready for people to hear it, but it's not necessarily finished. There's quite a few artists who have debuted things on my show, and it's maybe pretty close to being finished, but they appreciate that opportunity to just kind of drive around and hear it within the mix of all the other things on the show. If I'm playing something by Blossom Dearie and Lily Hyatt, and then playing maybe the Rolling Stones from a BBC radio show, and then playing something by a completely brand new group, and all of a sudden there's your song, and you go, oh, well, the bass is a little too loud on my track. It sounds smaller, or it sounds wide or thin or compared to all this other stuff. And then you get that extra step of separating yourself from this object of sound and how that sounds.
One thing that we feel is very, very strongly about, and part of our mission, is that we are a community radio station. Mm-hmm. So we need to engage with the community. And we've had lots of people come in for the talk shows and talk about various nonprofits and the work they're doing. We've also partnered with various nonprofits on initiatives like the Jesse Zazu Foundation. And there's been other nonprofits that we've worked with to do that kind of outreach to the community and keep people informed about what's going on. Give a chance for a lot of these nonprofits. the best they can get is maybe just a mention in a community calendar or something like that. So by having them come on the talk shows and talk about what they do, people start to realize, oh, wow, now I know, I've heard that name, but now I know exactly what they're doing and what their mission is.
Did you guys get to pick your call letters?
Yes, we did.
And tell me what they mean to you.
Well, from early on, we really wanted X in the title just because it's cool.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, it's cool sounding. And also, there's a brilliant book that came out in the early 80s called Border Radio, which is a history of the Mexican radio stations, what they called the Border Blasters, which were these unbelievably powerful radio stations that would set up just across the line in Mexico during the 30s and 40s and 50s. And they would broadcast at like crazy amounts of power, like 500,000 watts or 1 million watts. There's stories about people being able to hear the radio stations on barbed wire fences because the signals were so strong. I don't know if that's for true or not, or if that's just apocryphal. But anyway, so all the radio stations in Mexico start with the letter X, whereas like here in the US, our stations start with W or K. So there was always this kind of cool aura that you had all these weird stations broadcasting out of Mexico. That's where Wolfman Jack became a star, was on one of the Border Blaster stations, because he was down in Mexico doing those rock and roll shows in the late 50s, early 60s, and you could hear him basically all over the United States.
I didn't realize he was across the border for that.
So anyway, so there was an allure just for several reasons that we liked X. And then, so basically, when we got our license, we were allowed to pick our call letters, and the FCC has a function on their website where you can put in like a couple of letters and just see what's available out there with the letters. So W is required, and we put in WX, and we just got a list back of everything that was available. And when we started going down the list, we saw WX this, WX, and we ran across WXNA, and it was like NA, Nashville. So it was perfect. Yeah.
I wondered if that was the thoughts. I wondered if it was BNA, but replacing the B with an X as a wild card or something like that. That's awesome.
Well, X because it's cool, NA because it's Nashville.
Love it. Here we are. It is my favorite section of the interview. It's the speed round.
Oh dear.
Just like the game we used to play when we were kids, I ask you a question, and the first thing that comes to mind, please let it fly, and we'll go on to the next one.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Okay.
Fair enough. Speed round with Randy Fox. Which of the following was not on-air talent for WKRP in Cincinnati? Les Nessman, Venus Flytrap, Johnny Fever, or DJ Susan?
DJ Susan.
Who is DJ Susan?
Oh, he's one of our freeform stars. He's on Thursday mornings. He does a fantastic show, and he's one of the people that can just jump from genre to crazy genre, and yet it all makes sense. Yeah.
A man named Alan Freed is often described as having the first rock and roll radio show. Was that in the 1930s, the 1950s, or the 1970s?
It was in the 1950s, and in Cleveland, and I would dispute his his claim, but
I totally thought you might.
That's for another time, a time and another place.
I love it. Yeah, he claims to have even inaugurated the phrase rock and roll.
Well, there is some evidence of that, at least of him using it to describe music, because it was a term in popular songs going back to the 30s. But for my money, the first real rock and roll DJ was Gene Nobles right here in Nashville, Tennessee, on WLAC radio in the late 40s, 1940s. So, but that's
I can't wait to look that up.
That's my opinion.
I can't wait to look that up. You have a strong opinion, and I'm not opposed. In your email signature to me, you are co-founder and programming HepCat. What's a HepCat?
Well, you know, it's a cooler version of it's a hipster that is actually fairly cool, is what that is. It's just a 1950s or late 40s term that I've always liked, and I didn't want to be too presumptuous, so I kind of decided instead of saying programming director, I'm going to be the programming hepcat.
I love it. It makes me think of Joe Jackson. That's who I associate the word hepcat
He's
with.
a hepcat.
Yeah. How often does WXNA typically do station identifications during programming?
Well, we're required by law to do it at the top of every hour, but we encourage our DJs to identify as WXNA on every talk break because it's branding.
Give us a station identification for WXNA.
Well, the minimum required by law is WXNA LP Nashville. But you're listening to WXNA LP Nashville, 101.5 FM on your dial, and streaming online at WXNAFM.org. And then you can just be creative from there. Nashville's independent, freeform, listener-supported alternative.
Love it. Randy, what's the hardest thing about your job?
When I have to tell a DJ they've done something wrong, which fortunately doesn't happen that often, but occasionally there have been a few times where we've had to correct somebody for one thing or another. I like to say, what I always like to say about that is that I've spent my entire life fighting against the man, so it really bothers me when I have to be the man.
I completely understand that. We deal with similar things here at NECAT, and it's for the greater good.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the best thing about your job?
When I'm driving around and I'm hearing somebody some other DJ on the station, and they're just knocking it out of the park. Whether it's the music they're playing, the talk show that they're doing, the crazy radio, weirdo, surreal radio drama that we have on the air sometimes, because we have a couple of people that are doing that now. It's just hearing that radio station and knowing that I had a hand in bringing this to Nashville and making this a reality. I didn't do it by myself. I mean, it's a team effort, and just being part of that team and knowing that all these people are doing all this great work, and they're doing it because they love it.
And my easiest question of all, what's your website?
WXNAFM.org.
Randy Fox, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's our Nashville.